My grandma Pauline, my dad's mom, she died when I was 12 years old, when I was in sixth grade. So there's not a lot of these concrete, hard memories that I have of her. What I remember of her is her sweet spirit, her quietness, and also her sense of humor. When my grandmother was older, she had arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis in her fingers. So I remember that they were bent at really weird angles, but she never lost her sense of humor or her positive attitude. It's because I remember her as an older woman with these bent fingers that I don't really remember her as a gardener. But the stories that I have been told from my family is that my grandma Pauline had a beautiful garden. She had this wonderful touch to be able to bring life into the world through beautiful flowers. One of those flowers was a peony bush that was beautiful and grew in her yard. A few years ago, my Aunt Donna, who also received that gift of being able to create beautiful gardens, gave me a gift of some roots that had come from this peony bush that my grandma Pauline had. And so I took these roots and I planted them in the fall, not really knowing if I would be able to bring them to life in my own backyard. Well, miracles do happen, my friends, because a peony bush grew. And it took several years for that peony bush to finally be able to bring about one flower and then another flower. But I realized my mistake, that I didn't really know the peony bush very well. See, I'd taken those roots that my grandmother had nourished and let grow in her own garden, those roots that then had been transplanted to my Aunt Donna's garden, and she had tended and grown in her garden. Those roots I had planted in a place in which did not give a lot of good sunshine. Peony bushes apparently like full sun. And I planted the peony bush in a place that got a lot of shade. So the peony bush continued to come up and to provide me a few flowers, a little bit of that beauty and a little bit of that wonderful scent, but not what I was hoping and not for sure what my grandma had been able to produce or my Aunt Donna can produce. So this fall, before the weather turned, I dug up those roots. And let me tell you, it was a lot of work. I dug and I broke 2 spades trying to get these roots out of the ground in hopes that I could separate a few of them, leave some of those peonies right there where I'd planted them years ago, but then to move a couple of other of those roots into a more sunny space. It took so much effort. Even Simpson was trying to help me dig up these roots. And I finally was able to get a big chunk of root that came out. These roots had dug down way deep. And my soil is not good soil. It is clay. It is difficult. It is hard. And those roots had dug and dug and dug down deep. And they had multiplied to this huge root system that was underneath the ground. So I was able to take some of those roots, was able to take apart some of those roots and to replant them into a more favorable spot for these peonies. On those roots were also ants. Because if you know about peony bushes, you know that they need ants to be able to pollinate and to be able to take care of those flowers. And so along with those roots, I also transplanted a few of these ants. Don't know what will become of this peony bush. Stay tuned for the spring. But just the fact that I have these roots that once belonged to a plant that my grandmother tended and took care of and saw beautiful blossoms, gives me hope. And it helps ground me into who I am. You see, I may not remember a lot about my grandma Pauline. I only remember these few little snippets, but I have these roots, these deep roots that will continue to spring forth in my life, to continue to bring beauty and goodness throughout the years. And what a blessing those roots are. Even though they're not really pretty to look at, they're strong and they are firm and they provide beautiful plants that continue to remind me about where I've come from, but also give me hope for a future. What are your roots? What are those roots that people have been able to plant before you, tend before you, take care of that soil, take care of that plant, nourish it so there were strong roots there for you that then you could take over when the time was right? That you then could tend the same soil, the same roots, and make sure that there was life that would grow from those roots. Now we know that there are all type of plants that have roots, right? Sometimes those weeds have the strongest roots, and trying to be able to get out those weeds in our gardens are difficult at best. You have to really dig deep to find the full root in some of those weeds. Do you have weeds that are growing up within you? Do you have bitterness that is deeply rooted in your life? Anger that is deeply rooted? Those roots that don't bring goodness, but actually cause us more harm? Maybe this is the season for you to dig up those roots. Maybe this is the season for you to really get down and to look at those roots and to see if they are good plants or if they are just weeds. But maybe you have roots that have carried you, given you strength, provided love for you, have given you a foundation that then sends you into the world to do good. Jeremiah 17:7-8 says this: "Blessed is the person who trusts in the Lord, who trusts in the Lord. He is like a tree planted by water that sends out its roots by the stream and does not fear when the heat comes, for its leaves remain green, and is not anxious in the year of drought, for it does not cease to bear fruit." Years ago, I remember seeing a tree that had these roots that were all on the top of the soil, very close to the surface of the ground, so close that you would trip over them if you weren't careful. They did not have those deep roots that went deep down, and it's because they didn't have enough water. And so they had to stay up towards the top, or actually some of these trees had too much water. They were being watered from a sprinkler, and it didn't make them have to dig deep to look for water. But what happened was when those trees had a huge gust of wind, sometimes it was these trees that fell first, because their roots were along the surface. Their roots had not had to work hard to find the water. The roots had that water right there available for them at the top. And so their roots were just at surface level. But then we know that there's other trees that have strong roots because they have had to dig deep below the surface to find the water that would bring them life. Are your roots deep? Have they had to struggle and to dig deep and to figure out who they are and find those streams of life that are found in God? Are your roots deep enough to be able to hold firm when a big a gust of wind comes? Or are your roots at surface level, where you haven't had to do a lot of work, and so they're right there, visible, but if a strong gust comes, it might knock over your tree? We have been blessed by people who have given us roots, who have tended those roots, who have helped those roots grow deep down within. But it is our job to tend now the roots that we have in our own lives. Are those roots filled with bitterness, with poison, with envy, with anger? Are those roots giving us life, or are they poisoning our life? If they are, it's time to dig deep, to wrestle with those roots, to pull those roots out, and to make room for roots that will grow, that will bring life, that will bring love into the world. And once we have those roots going, we can't just let them remain at surface level. We have to tend to them. We have to continue to grow in our faith, to continue to pray for one another and for our church and for ourselves, to continue to tend to those roots so that those roots will be strong and will hold on to us no matter the gusts that come our way. But also we'll be able to then carry on for those who come after us. Those roots that can bring beautiful flowers, can be replanted into somebody else's life, and to help have that fruit that comes from the beautiful roots that are underneath. My friends, this is a season for us to look at our roots, to figure out what kind of roots we have deep inside of us, what kind of roots we want to have, and how we can work with those roots that we have within us to be able to bring life and goodness into the world. So let's check to make sure that our roots are roots of faithfulness, roots of grace, roots of love.